Right, here's our cell membrane and structure review video. We're starting off here with some learning objectives, just kind of some points that we're going to go over in this video. So if they don't make sense yet, that's the point. They are: the cell membrane encases the rest of the cell and determines what can go in or out. The cell membrane can be the cell membrane can be called the plasma membrane and is made up of a phospholipid bilayer, as well as other proteins. Phospholipids make up the phospholipid bilayer, and they are molecules that include a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. And only small hydrophobic or nonpolar molecules can pass through the membrane. Other molecules need help. This is because the membrane is semi-permeable. So those are our learning objectives for this video. Diving right in. We've got our cell membrane here. This is actually a diagram of an entire cell. The cell membrane, again, is going to surround the entire cell, kind of like the skin for the cell. You can see it here. They have it listed as the plasma membrane. Remember, it can be either the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. Both work, okay? And that is made up of a phospholipid bilayer. This area here inside of the cell, okay, any of the area inside the cell is called the intracellular space. That's right over here. Everything outside the cell is considered the extracellular space. That will be an important distinction. Here's a little bit about the structure of the membrane itself before we get into some of the things that are inside of the membrane. So we've got our phospholipid bilayer. Remember, the phospholipid bilayer is what makes up the cell membrane or the plasma membrane, same thing. And it's made up of two layers of phospholipids, okay? Hence the bilayer part. Each phospholipid has a hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tails. Okay, the hydrophilic head likes water. It is attracted towards water. It will move towards the water. Our hydrophobic tails, they're considered water-fearing. Okay, they do not like the water, and they will actually move away from the water. Okay, so what we get, and we'll see why in a little bit later on in the video, what we get is our bilayer here with the tails pointed in and the heads pointed out. Okay, so in this diagram here, this area above the phospholipid bilayer, that'd probably be our extracellular space. Down here would be our intracellular space. So here's a little bit more detail about our cell membrane structure. Okay, we just went over our bilayer there and the phospholipids that make it up. However, there's also these other proteins that we talked about. These proteins are there as well. They serve a variety of different functions. We're going to be seeing a couple examples of them in the rest of the video today. And we have our same diagram here, but now we've got this question here. Why is it a bilayer? Okay, the reason that it's a bilayer, it will actually spontaneously form a bilayer. It does not need any help. The reason it does this is because the hydrophilic heads are attracted to the water and the hydrophobic tails are repelled by the water. I'm going to go back to our diagram over here just for a moment. Think about what's inside the cell. It's an awful lot of water. Think about what's outside the cell. There's also an awful lot of water. So because of that, there is a ton of water on both sides of the membrane. That means that the hydrophilic heads are going to be attracted to the outside of the cell in the extracellular space, but they're also going to be attracted to the inside of the cell, the intracellular space. And our hydrophobic tails here, the only place they can hide from the water is behind those heads, right next to each other, inside of the membrane itself. Okay, so they kind of naturally form this bilayer with the tails all facing each other in order to avoid the water. Okay, so as mentioned in our learning objectives, the cell membrane is considered semi-permeable. If it was permeable, that would mean that things could pass right through it, no problem. But it's actually semi-permeable, which is a good thing. It's semi-permeable, which means that only some things can pass through it freely. Okay, for example, only small hydrophobic molecules and some water, okay, is able to pass right through the membrane itself, right between those phospholipids, past the phospholipid tails, and into the intracellular space. Okay, what we've got over here, these are protein channels. Okay, we've got a protein channel right here, and we have a carrier protein right here. They are both proteins inside the cell. Okay, I'm going to go back again. They're both proteins inside the cell, such as this one here. Okay, and their job is to allow things into the cell that the membrane would not. Okay, so they allow things that are either not small or not hydrophobic. They allow those things right through. We've got a table here that's kind of going to show a very basic table that's going to show kind of how things can go through the membrane. Okay, so over here we've got charged ions. Okay, an example of that would be sodium right here. Okay, sodium ion. This is considered a hydrophilic molecule. That means that it likes the water. It's attracted to water. And it is not able to pass right through the membrane by itself. It would need help from a protein channel or carrier protein. Next up, we've got water right here. Okay, water looks like this. It is hydrophilic as well, go figure. It likes water. Only some can pass through the membrane, and it's not because of its size or anything necessarily, although that does contribute. It's because there's so much of it. So because there's so much water on both sides of the membrane, some of it is able to get through. But most of it is going to have to enter or exit the cell through special protein channels. Again, those are these guys here, called aquaporins, that are specially designed to allow water in and out. Okay, next up we've got small nonpolar molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, those guys are going to look like these right here, and those guys are really, really small, and they're hydrophobic, which means they have no problem wiggling right past those hydrophobic tails. They can get right through the membrane very easily. Okay, in and out, no problem. And then we've got large molecules. Okay, an example of that would be right here. Okay, these can be hydrophobic or hydrophilic. Different molecules have different polarities. Okay, however, these are going to be too large to fit through. Okay, so they will need to get in another way. Okay, some of them may be able to go through protein channels, but depending on how large they are, they may need other ways as well. So we'll talk about those in another video. So here's kind of an example here. Okay, we've got our, let me close out of here so I can move these things. Okay, and I actually meant to delete this. Okay, so we've got water, right? We've got O2, we've got our sodium ions, our large molecules, and our carbon dioxide. So remember, oxygen is really small and it's hydrophobic. Okay, so it's able to pass right through the cell, no problem, in and out. Same thing for our carbon dioxide. Okay, it's able to pass through the cell, no problem, in and out. Okay, water, there's so much of it that every so often some of it is able to make its way through, even though it is hydrophilic and the tails are hydrophobic. It's kind of the exception to the rule. Ions, okay, they are that's their charge, ultimately. Their charge does not jive with the tails. Okay, so for that reason, they kind of are repelled out here. They're just left to kind of bounce around and hope they can find a channel either in or out. And of course, you can see clearly that our large molecules here, no way that's going to fit through. Okay, it's going to need a special protein or another way to enter or exit the cell. There's no way it's getting through the membrane either way. Awesome. So now, let's kind of do our recap here. So in this video, we went over the cell membrane, encases the rest of the cell, and determines what can go in or out of the cell. We talked about how the cell membrane can also be called the plasma membrane, and how it's made up of a phospholipid bilayer, as well as other proteins. We learned that phospholipids make up that phospholipid bilayer, and they're molecules that include a hydrophilic head, which means they like the water and they're attracted to it, and a hydrophilic tail, which is water-fearing, meaning that they move away from the water. We also learned that only small hydrophobic or nonpolar molecules can pass through the membrane, and other molecules cannot pass through, or they need to pass through a different way. And again, this is because the membrane is a semi-permeable membrane. It's not a completely permeable membrane. So some things can pass through, others cannot. Thanks for watching the video. Hope it was helpful.